You're listening to part one of an interview with the third place winner of the Catholic University Center for Human Rights annual Human Rights Essay Contest by William Saunders, Director of the Center for Human Rights. To read the award-winning essays, go to humanrights.catholic.edu.
So welcome to another edition of the Barefoot Lawyer Podcast. I'm William Saunders. I'm the director of the Center for Human Rights, where Chen Guangcheng is the Distinguished Fellow. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Jonathan Froelich, who is, Jonathan, are you still a PhD student at Catholic, or are you?
Yes, yeah, I'm finished with my coursework and now faced with the gargantuan task of taking my major comps in the fall. So I passed minor comps last year, but that's kind of the last thing before I go into dissertation. So yes, I'm still, it's slow going when you work full time and have two kids under 10. So it's not as quick as I'd like, but I'm enjoying the journey so far for sure.
I assume your PhD, your dissertation is not going to be about China, or is it going to be?
No, my concentration is American government with a minor of world politics. I'm getting in the PhD in the politics department. So I'd like to do something related to a national security, something terrorism, something that kind of dovetails with my full-time job and my career. But certainly, any conversation you have about international affairs or almost anything, China inevitably comes up. So this is one of the reasons I was drawn to this. I was telling Will before we got started that this, if nothing else, this is proof that it literally pays to check out the bulletin board in Aquinas Hall because you see some interesting things, and this was something that I thought would be interesting to do, and it certainly was an interesting journey just to kind of consider this issue, which I hadn't really given a whole lot of attention to before. So this is a good excuse to kind of delve into another area which wasn't part of my day-to-day, either academically or professionally.
Yeah. And professionally, do you work in the national security arena?
Yeah, so I've been with the FBI for about at the end of this month, it'll be 21 years, and since November, I've been detailed to the United States Army as the Army Intelligence Oversight Program Manager. So managing intelligence oversight for the entire U.S. Army. So that's part of a joint duty program. So still on the books with the FBI, but for all practical purposes, I'm an Army employee. So that's So pretty much my entire post undergraduate career has been criminal justice, law enforcement, intelligence analysis, program management, that kind of thing.
Well, so let's talk about, let me remind the listener. So the Center for Human Rights sponsors an annual essay contest where we invite people to reflect on a human rights issue connected in some way or another with the Chinese Communist Party, and either its actions in its own country or its actions abroad. So this year we asked to look at a human rights issue in China and to suggest how the United States might respond to it in a productive way. So Jonathan's essay, which was an excellent essay and one of the prize winners, it has a great title to it. It says, "This may sting a bit." And then it's subtitled, "A Practical Plan for Chinese Human Rights Intervention by the United States." So, Jonathan, just, reading your essay, it's clear that, you have some sophistication in thinking about diplomacy and international relations. So why don't you maybe frame the approach you took to this question, and then talk a little bit about the human rights issue you decided to focus on.
Absolutely. So let me work backwards a little bit. So I started by reading last year's winners. Once I decided to go on this little adventure and try my luck here, try my skill here, I went and looked at the winners from 2023, at least the ones that were available on the website, and many of them seem to be, not surprisingly, considering this is CUA, very kind of spiritual and religious in nature. And I certainly have a strong respect for that. As much as I think the term gained a negative stigma following the Vietnam War, I'm a big believer in hearts and minds, winning hearts and minds, that is. I'm a huge proponent of spirituality and things of that nature. I just kind of reflected on not only the essays from 2023, but also some kind of emerging international situations, whether it be the war in Ukraine between Ukraine and Russia, Israel and Palestine, and then of course, as we're talking about today, the Chinese human rights issue. And I just began to think that um, so I kind of took that and flipped it on its head a little bit and decided to go a more practical approach. As I said, my entire career it has been focused on very practical matters. Not that I don't try to use creativity in my work and my studies, but very practical. So that's what I kind of tried to do, is take this problem and try to apply a multi-dimensional practical solution. I think when we're looking at all of the situations that are going on in the world today, we kind of have a tendency to have an emotional response. Perhaps that's not the most apt word, but that's the best I can think of right now. And we kind of tend to use these one-dimensional approaches. And I think we're getting to a better place in Ukraine, where this is another topic for another podcast, another time. But I thought the news story that the United States has given Ukraine permission to attack targets in Russia with U.S. weapons should have been a bigger story than it was, but heck, they don't ask me. So, but I just started to think that we need to be more creative with this approach. What is going to resonate with China? Certainly, it's not any sort of a moralistic kind of lecture to them saying you should do this, you should do that with regard to human rights. So what's going to resonate with the Chinese government? And certainly, it's not a problem like Ukraine where we're just going to keep throwing money at it. It's not a problem where we can, with all respect to the 2023 winners, that we can just throw the gospel at. It has to be something that's kind of multi-sided. And just, I'm a very practical person. So that's what kind of led me to the philosophy that I was employing throughout the essay, was just, okay, what is a good chance of working here? What is going to, what have we tried? What has been successful? What haven't we tried? And what might be successful? And kind of you mentioned the title. Kind of the reason behind the title is that, I think we might need to consider a cooperative approach, even though, that's maybe read like we're condoning this behavior, which I don't think we should do. But certainly just kind of, I was reading recently that the G7 was scolding, China for, supporting Russia in the war and sort of, helping with that effort. And then we come out and we see Russia and North Korea getting together. So, we can't handle all these crises all at once, especially from these countries if they get together. So the more we can do to try and, as painful as it might be, bring countries like China closer and kind of take an incremental approach to solving these human rights atrocities, I think the better off we're going to be. So that was kind of my overall philosophy, and hopefully that frames where I'm coming from.
Sure. And, like I said, the second part of the essay was, what can the U.S. do to respond? So there's no question that human rights and the approach that the center takes, and I believe in, is, you have to identify the problems, but the question is, and I'm a lawyer, so I tell my students all the time, I'm not kind of a lifelong academic. I'm a public policy lawyer who has a program in human rights. And the reason I tell them that is because the job of a lawyer is to craft a solution either for your client or essentially for your client, but for wherever it is you want to go. And so I think it's great to be thinking very practically about how can we address and maybe be effective with a problem.
The Catholic University of America's Center for Human Rights has published a documentary on the United Nations Universal Declaration on Human Rights. The documentary features world-class human rights experts, from former State Department officials to ambassadors and human rights activists. It can be found on our website at humanrights.catholic.edu.